I intend to call somebody as pseudo-nationalist. We can understand the term nationalism and nationalist, but there are certain people who, under the garb of nationalism, promote their clannish interest. One such person is Subramanian Swamy. He once said that the Aryan-Dravidian divide is a myth.
The other pollution in our history is this word Dravidian and Aryan. The DNA of all Indians is the same. Brahmins and scheduled caste DNA is the same. Muslim and Hindu DNA is the same. So North Indians, South Indians, West Indians, Eastern, all the DNA is the same.
And this is not only his personal view. The most of the Brahminical interest express the same views. For example, the 2 volumes of Tamadaga Andanar Varalaru, which was published by Tamil Nadu Brahmin Association in the year 2002. That was a book which categorically stated that there is no such thing. It is a myth. Aryan, Dravidian, both are myth. Aryana, Aryamavadu, Dravidamavadu. That is how they simply try to dismiss it as something like fabricated ones. Now we will have to know what is the historical truth behind this claim, whether it is a myth or reality. In Tamil ancient literature, Bhakti literature, there is a reference. Aryam Kandai, Tamilum Kandai. So if it comes from the mouth of Thiruñana Sambandar, upper or somebody, the Saiva saint, do you want to describe that statement as expressions out of idiocy or ignorance? That is one. So there was Aryan segregation even in the Bhakti age. They distinguished Arya from Tamils. And then Arya Padai Kadanda Nedanjadiyan. What does it mean? The one who had successfully withstood Aryan invasion. Arya Padai Kadanda Nedanjadiyan, a Pandyan king. So they had a definite understanding of the Arya word Arya. The Aryan means non-Tamil, the invader from the north. So the Arya at that time meant 2 different things. One is non-Tamil and mostly from north. Arya Padai Kadanda. So Arya generally means the one who is an immigrant to Tamil country. Immigrant. So all the Brahmins were categorized as Aryans in our ancient literature, in our medieval literature, in our present literature. Brahmins are Aryans. But there is something more in that word Arya. Buddha was an Arya, but he disputed the Sanatana. He disputed Brahmin primacy. He rejected the caste order under the Brahmin leadership. He was an Arya, but he was against Brahmin. Brahmins usually try to protect themselves under the garb of Aryan, as if they belong to a larger category. Arya means a larger population, but Brahmin means a smaller segment of the population. But the smaller minority segment dominated Indian society, politics from the very beginning. This is there because the minorities who hold over the government has been a regular feature in the world history. This was acknowledged by the famous historian Toynbee. Okay. So the Arya word, they themselves, they were coined by Aryans, they were used by Aryans, and they are recognized by in the Tamil literature. Why the Shankara used the word Dravida Shishu? Was it out of his ignorance? Was he an idiot to say that he was Thiruñana Sambandar was a Dravida Shishu? So he used the word Dravida. Skanda Purana, their Sanskrit, one of the 18 Puranas, Skanda Purana, described some Brahmins as Pancha Dravida. What does it mean, Panchadravida? Those Brahmins who were residing in 5 Dravidian regions. Panchadravida. The Brahmins residing in Dravidian regions. The Dravidian region at that time included Maharashtra and Gujarat. So India had a larger Dravidian territory earlier, Panchadravida. That is, some of the Brahmins today, they had that surname Dravida. Rahul Dravid. Though he is a Brahmin, he belonged to that particular Brahmin category who were immigrants to Dravida region. So the Dravida is an historical reference. An inscription issued by the Kalingan king Karavela, Chedi dynasty, Kalingan Karavela, in the year 169 BC, before the Common Era, BC. And that Hadikumba inscription, he refers to his conflict with a confederacy of South Indian kings, which he called Dramila Sangadam, Dravida Confederacy. Is it a myth? The people who coined the word Dravida were themselves Aryans, Brahmin scholars. They coined the word to indicate those who were non-Aryans and who were non-Brahmins. This divide is historical. That is one. And why when it became inconvenient to them in the present day, when the linguistic states were formed, the Aryan word irks their interest. It embarrasses them, because that makes them an alien in Tamil land, a foreigner in Tamil land. So the Brahmins are considered or treated as if they are not Tamils, non-Tamils. From that embarrassment they want to save, because by that time the Dravidian movement emerged. Based on this ethnic cultural divide, movements emerged, challenging the monopolistic hold of Aryans or Brahmins over administration, religion, society in every field. When this movement emerged, when this interest of the non-Brahmins were made the focal point of political and social activities, the Brahmins adopted this technique. There is no such divide, we are all Hindus. We are all Hindus. Will the Hinduism be exclusive of this Varna division? We are all Hindus, we are all not Brahmins. We are all Hindus, we are all not Kshatriyas. We are all Hindus, we are all not Vaishyas. We are all Hindus, we are all Shudras, but all the Shudras are not equal, because Shudra is fragmented into thousands of caste and subcaste. So they cannot merge into a homogeneous unit because of the caste divide, which was created by the Brahminical order. The Gotras are there. The Gotras did not prevent the Brahmins to get united among themselves. That was a regulation, that was not a divide. But caste is not a regulation, it is a divide. It divides the society into various segments. Each one will not have matrimonial relations with other or social relations with other. Who created this? Did Thiruvalluvar create this? Did the Tamil scholars create this order? Did you find any Tamil literature where the Shudra, the non-Aryan, the Nicha, Milecha are mentioned in any Tamil literature? You can find such references only in Sanskrit literature. Most of the Sanskrit literature were authored by the Brahmin, dexterous brains. Dexterity, the cunningness. They want to divide the society into so many fragments so that they can be always the helm of affairs. They took upon themselves as the advisors of the kings. They claimed themselves to be the earthly devas, Bhusuras. They made the foolish kings, not only Tamils, elsewhere. All the kings were befooled by the Brahmins that they represent the divine will. And because of that, the Indian society as a whole, there is no single society. Societies of India were befooled, exploited, and were degenerated by this order. So this Dravida and Arya is not a myth. When this Dravidian movement came, this Dravidian consciousness, how it emerged in the southern part of this land. During the colonial period, the first part of the colonial period, the colonial foreigners were assisted by the Brahmin elite in every field of administration. In Bengal, they were the administrators, because no foreigner could rule any country without the coordination, cooperation of the local elite. So Brahmins were always helping the invaders. They had been the advisors to all the invaders. But this assistance to invaders did not make them inferior. They manipulated ways and means by which they could make the new ruler to adopt his dogma. That is what happened there. The Rajaputs were all foreigners. The foreign invaders, they came to India. They were culturally weak. That was exploited by the local people. So the Brahmins gave the surname Kshatriya. They invented new mythologies. The Agni-Gunda theory. Pradiviraja Raso, a poem commemorating Pradiviraja, which was composed by Chand Bardai, gives a description of the Agni-Gunda. The Rajaputs, the Parasuraman destroyed all the Kshatriyas in India. There was no Kshatriya. So there was no Kshatriya after the fall of Ajatasattu in India. So it was ruled only by Shudras. They themselves agree. Indian territories were ruled by powerful Sudra dynasties. Non-Brahmin, non-Aryan dynasties. They acknowledge it. But they now manipulated. Some of the non-Brahmins, some of them were Shudras, some of them foreigners. They were made to believe that they are the new Kshatriyas, Neo-Kshatriyas. So they performed certain yajnas, something like Shuddhi moment now. The one who had undertaken this ritual will become a new Kshatriya. So Brahmins give them the status. In return, they would protect the Brahminical order. That is how they sustain their interest in India. It is historical. It is not myth. So in fact, the Aryan-Dravidian divide, the Aryans themselves suffered because of the Varna system. The Shudras, they are in Aryan land. Not all the Aryans are Brahmins. Only some 10% or 15% or 20 at the best 20% are Brahmins. The remaining part, they were not Brahmins. So they deliberately assumed this Aryan tag in order to protect, in order to shield their Brahmin interest. So it is something like a facade, the Aryan facade, to protect the Brahmin interest. So it is that. But here, the usual claim was that the Brahmin is the Bhusara and the Brahmins were the founders of the Indian civilization. They founded the Indian civilization. Throughout the world, no priesthood created any civilization. Go to any civilization, you will find that priesthood were something parasites. Once the civilization was developed, then the priesthood enters, saps the energy, controls everything, exploits everything, and misleads the king. That is the role of priesthood. Never a priest created a civilization. You refer to any civilization in the world. Can India be a different one, distinct one, exception? No, it is so here too. Civilizations were created by hard-working people. Those who plowed the land, those who built the dams and other things, irrigation system, those who removed, those who created the bricks, those who created pottery, those who could weave cloth, those who could deal in metallurgy. So all the civilizational contributions came from the working class. And when they created a kingship, the king was misguided in the priesthood. So it was not a Brahmin civilization in India, whether it is Aryan or Dravidian. It is not a Brahmin civilization. The civilization of the working people. But in the Aryan, so-called Aryan civilization, by which it is a misconception to treat Aryan civilization as a Brahmin civilization. Brahmins were always misleading elements in every civilization. They made the king, Kshatriya, to carry out their diktat. That is how it happened. So they used to say that they created the first language. In fact, Sanskrit, Vedas emerged even before the creation of the universe. Their claims are, and the people now say that it is scientific. The retrieval of the old knowledge system. So the Vedas emerged in the world before the creation of the entire universe, even before the emergence of mankind. So they use, and their first language, Sanskrit, Deva Bhasha. And they were the earthly Devas they created. So that Deva Bhasha gave birth to several other languages. This myth was demolished. The Aryans, in fact, the British were swayed by the Brahmins by the theory that the Brahmins and the British were all of Aryan origin. Aryan brotherhood. They were cousins earlier. So they were, because that benefited the Brahmin bureaucracy. By claiming for proximity with them, they could have some claims, promotions, everything. They could gain everything from the British government. Jones fell a victim to this. Max Muller fell a victim to this. So at that time it was convenient to say that the Indo-Aryan theory was convenient to Brahmin interests. So they were the supporters. That is why Tilak also wrote a book, The Arctic Home of Arya Vedas. They belong to Arctic region, Scandinavian region. Tilak too stated. He gave several arguments. So it was convenient to them. But in the independent India, it is inconvenient to them. They are identified with the foreigners. They are not natives. So they could be estranged from the native people. So they tried to dispute everything which they promoted earlier. In the meanwhile, the Ellis, Francis White Ellis and Caldwell, through their efforts, and 22 other scholars were there in between. They worked on the linguistic system and found that there was a Dravidian group of languages signifying a distinct culture that prevailed through thousands of years in India. And this was confirmed by the Indus Valley excavations. So the Brahminical claims to Indian culture, civilization, knowledge, everything were demolished by the new findings, the Dravidian group of languages and pre-Aryan Dravidian civilization in North India itself. That is, thereafter they tried to distort called the explanations earlier. What was Dravidian civilization earlier, now they try, they are part of the Aryan civilization. They now reject everything Dravidian. In the beginning of the century and even the beginning of the independent era, they used to dispute both Dravidian and Aryan. Now they felt convenient to adopt Aryan because they think that by which they could influence and control most of the North Indians. It was a political will. They deliberately used the word Aryan civilization. The same people earlier said there was no Dravidian, no Aryan divide. Accepted Dravidian. But they did not, by what you call the conspiracy of silence, by not mentioning Dravidian, they tried to make the people believe that there is no such thing as Dravidian. And some of our people, they say, are we Tamils or Dravidians? By Dravidian, we mean a non-Aryan civilizational basis. The languages they developed and they became split into various subgroups. This had been happening everywhere. So, which was the first language is not our concern. This civilizational trend was entirely non-Aryan. That is our basic interest. If you try to divert your attention from culture, civilization to languages, you are trying to sow the seeds of distrust among the various Dravidian groups. Nobody disputes Keralites, the Kannadiga, the Andhra, these people never disputed the primacy of Tamil language in the Dravidian group. The most ancient language, Tamil, they agree. The living first language, Tamil, they don't agree. They call Tamil as the eldest sister. In what way it is going to injurious to Tamil interest? Why do you insist everything emanated from Tamil? Tamil itself undergone changes. The Sangam Tamil is not valid now. The modern Tamil is different. Language also undergoes transformation. Every group. We belong to a Dravidian group. Our language is Tamil. That is not disputed by the Dravidian concept. The Dravida, because anybody could adopt a language. Even the black people have English as their mother tongue. The people of Arunachal Pradesh, some of them have English as their mother tongue now. And people of Meghalaya, they adopt English as their language. Language could be adopted, but culture is a definite thing. So, linguistic culture, when you say, it is Dravidian language. Linguistic society, Tamil society. The Arya Dravida is an historical one. There were references, even in their own literature. There are Aryan Tamil divide, we find in the Bhakti literature. The conflict with the Aryan kings, we found mentioned in the Sangam literature. And the Sanskrit literature too mentioned Dravida Shishu, and Prakrit literature was the earliest to identify us as Dravida. So, Dravida is not a new term. Dravida is a world term indicating not only one particular linguistic group, but those groups which were non-Aryan. So, this Dravida and this Arya divide is not a myth, it is a historical reality, by which we don't mean that we cannot be together, not that, because we know that Aryan society itself is afflicted by the Brahminical social ethos. That is why Ghanshyam, the great leader of Bahujan Samaj party, he named his party as Bahujan, Vehumakkal Tamil. The masses are non-Brahmins, though some of them can be termed as Aryans, non-Brahmins. So, that unity we aspire. That is why Periyar went and addressed meetings in Uttar Pradesh. So, we are not against any people who are non-Tamils. We try to mobilize them against an exploitative order, that is Sanatana order. So, for which we stabilize here as Dravidians, we will stabilize with others as the masses, Bahujan. So, this is our concept. Nothing irrational, nothing unscientific, nothing inhuman, nothing anti-national. It is all meant for a confederated society.